And we're live. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Solvable Mysteries podcast. My name is Juras, and as every week, I'm joined by Glenn Highcove. We're going to be talking about another true crime case. Glenn, how are you feeling, and are you excited for this week's case?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I had a nice outing to the art museum today, and it was a nice kind of time away from stuff. So now that we're back, it's funny you remarked, you made a good observation that geographically we're not at all far away from where, I mean, like where on the planet our last case was about.
Exactly. We're going to be talking about the unsolved disappearance of Morgan Nick. Why I said unsolved is because her mother, Colleen Nick, is still actively trying to find out what happened to her daughter. And she has started a Morgan Nick Foundation that helps with missing children. She's doing fantastic things. We want to talk about this case, especially for myself, when we were picking out cases to discuss for episode 99. I know we had like a whole bunch of like really good audience member suggestions for this week's case, but we end up going with the Morgan Nick's disappearance because we realized that literally 1 month ago or somewhere around that period of time, we have a new, a very important lead in this case. It's going to be a picture. And I think it's gonna add a lot of more interest to this case. There's also a documentary that's should come out on Netflix eventually. So I think this case is really gonna move. So we're hunting these cases that look like they will move, and I think Morgan Nick's case has the potential to move shortly. I want to quickly read the story because this case is a little bit lesser known. So I'm going to be stopping through the story at certain points to ask questions for Glenn and just to like reflect on certain areas of the story. And after that, I guess we can definitely jump to the questions and give our theories on what had happened to Morgan potentially. And this is happening in 1995. Once again, Glenn said that we're not really venturing off too far from last week's case, which is correct because if everyone who's listening to this podcast could just quickly jump to the Google Earth that we're showing here on the visual assets can be found on the YouTube channel, you will see that the area that we are referring to is essentially Arkansas, but this Arkansas location where the disappearance occurred is literally just a handful of miles away from Oklahoma. And for everyone who listened to last week's show, everyone remembers that we did a show about the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. So I guess, it also makes sense for us to stay in close proximity for this week. Now, the story goes that on the night of June 9th, 1995, 6-year-old Morgan Nick went to a Little League baseball game in Alma, Arkansas, with her mother Colleen Nick. During the game, two children asked Morgan if she could come play in the field with them to catch fireflies. At 10:30 p.m., Colleen, Morgan's mother, allowed her to go with them. However, when the game ended at 10:45 p.m., the two the two children that initially asked to go play and like catch fireflies with Morgan. By the way, these kids were a little bit older than Morgan. One was a boy who was 10 years of age, and another was a girl who was 8 years of age. Now, Morgan was 6, let's remember. So these kids are a little bit older than Morgan. And they return back to Colleen, Morgan's mother, 15 minutes later, after they initially went to catch fireflies. I thought this was pretty interesting for 15 minutes to play. Like that's a short period of time. I will let you answer that. But like one other point I want to mention here is that the kids said to Colleen that Morgan is by her car getting sand out of her shoes. However, when Colleen went over to see if she was there, Morgan actually wasn't there, and then panic ensued. And then I will give the next part of the story, what happened next. But a few questions here I want to ask you immediately, man. So first of all, don't you think it's kind of weird for Little League baseball games to be happening at 10 to like be ending at 10:45 p.m.? That's pretty close to midnight, I would say.
Yeah, I can see how that seems weird, especially for something that, is basically sports for little kids, because you wouldn't think that that would be normal. It turns out that baseball in America, and I'm sure probably in a couple of other countries where baseball is really popular, um, there's a lot of demand on these resources. So I just by coincidence, the other week I read an article about this facility in Long Island, New York, where they literally, there was so much demand for little league stuff. They made like a professional baseball level facility, and were charging like really high fees. This is before Corona, and like it was massively popular. The thing was sold out. So I think just because there's so many games that need to be played, and there's limited resources, like I think for this thing, is there only the one baseball diamond?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, so that, I mean, right there, that's just thing. That thing was probably busy all week. Like I've been to places that's just locally to me. I remember like kind of being in Morgan's same situation, but a little bit older, where like some friend of mine, his brother was playing at one of these games, and there were like four of those diamonds, and the place is busy. So just think, you have all these teams that are trying to play. There's only so many nights in the week, and yeah, it just, I can imagine it's just constantly booked, and that's the way it is. One thing just before we continue, um, I'm really reluctant to ever correct your pronunciation, because of course
Of course.
your your English is far better than not only most Americans' English, but especially for someone who's a second language. Arkansas. So the S is silent at the end. I'm not sure.
Oh,
It sounded like you were saying it. Yeah, just I know,
right.
because even me, when I read it, sometimes I kind of say art, because it looks just like there's a state right near it called Kansas, but yeah, Arkansas. So just it's like a, just turn the,
Right.
just like Warsaw, right? Just turn the end of it into a saw,
Oh,
like a,
okay, okay. Yeah, yeah. But
good old
it's,
boy. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just reading how it's spelled. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It
yeah, how it's
has
spelled.
an,
It's yet another weird name in America.
yeah. Thanks for correcting me for sure, dude. Okay, so let's go through the story. What happened next? So, apparently, Colleen asked a coach, but this was choppy because a little like some sources actually state that Colleen asked the other two children herself. I saw a source stating that Colleen asked a coach to ask the children about the events. You know, the two children who returned without Morgan Nick, because let's remember, these children are literally like the last people to see Morgan Nick. But turns out that they were not, because both of the children remember seeing a man, and this was described as a creepy man. We only have him as a creepy man who had no shoes, had no shirt, was his age was between 23 years of age and 38 years of age. So that's definitely like a pretty difficult age to like pinpoint to anyone. I guess that just shows that they don't really have the correct like characteristics of the man, because that's definitely a very wide range, sort of like in the Delphi murders case with the suspect being anywhere from like 18 to 40. I mean, this is not as extreme as that case, but still. And then also, the man, as I've said, was wearing no shoes, was wearing shorts, jean shorts, had like a beard, an unkept beard. And basically, this man talked to all of the children. So, talked to Morgan, talked to the boy who was 10 years of age, talked to the girl who was 8 years of age, but law enforcement will not release the information of what was said to these children because they wanna have at least some sort of information to like weed out the fake admitters or like the crazy people, the crazies. So in order to do that, they will not be releasing that information. Now, Colleen, you know, later on actually moved to Alma because, by the way, I'm not really sure if I mentioned this little fact. Everything that we're talking about is happening in Alma, Arkansas. I hope I said it correctly this time. But I will say that Colleen and Morgan were actually from a city called Ozark. So it's a city pretty much next to Alma, and the quick backstory on how Morgan and Colleen actually ended up in Alma is because they had friends in Alma, and they were just, I guess, driving to see some kids play Little League baseball in Alma. So it was a pretty chill day. Definitely no one was actually expecting of anything creepy to happen. Before we jump into the suspect, or perhaps maybe I will read out how like the suspect's official description that law enforcement has released. I think we will be able to talk about the sketches a little bit later on, but I will have some questions. I just want to quickly say what the police official statement is about the suspect, and then I will ask for your input here a little bit. So the police, even to this day, are looking for a white male described by Morgan's friends as, quote, creepy. So in 1995, this creepy man was described as being between the ages of 23 and 38, 6 foot tall, 180 pounds. He has never been identified. He was driving a dull red older Ford pickup with a white camper shell. Now, let's remember this Ford pickup truck with a camper shell because we will be returning to this detail for sure. It's probably the main reason why we're doing this case this week. It is suspected that Morgan's disappearance may have been related to the attempted abductions that happened around the same time that she was abducted. Actually, on the morning of June 9th, so on the same day, a 4-year-old was pulled into a truck outside a laundromat in Alma in the same city. Fortunately, her mother was able to retrieve her. On the following day, June 10th, 1995, a 9-year-old was forced into the men's restroom at a convenience store in Fort Smith. So let's just quickly jump to Fort Smith. It's a town kind of also like literally right next to the border of Oklahoma. So that's kind of interesting. And then both of these other potentially related cases or unrelated cases, we will want to discuss that as well. All had a suspect who matched the description of the suspect in the Morgan Nick's case. Now, Morgan's mother, Colleen, had actually stated that these incidents did not even occur. So it's a little bit choppy because you have sources like the Charlie Project, which, I deem to be like pretty reputable sources stating that they did happen, but her mother said that they didn't happen or are unrelated. So not sure how much weight to put in there. So okay, so we have a man who is creepy and who talks to Morgan, and then he leaves, no one can find him, and then Morgan disappears. So obviously, we can put two and two together, and this is why, this is kind of why he became a suspect. Now, what I want to ask you immediately, man, if you could just quickly look at the Google Earth map right here. So if you can see, this is Highway 40, I-40, and this highway is, if you drive from this highway, you can't see the baseball field. So would you say that this is the abductor? If the suspect is the man responsible for the abduction, would you say that he actively was scoping out the area to abduct a child? Because it's not like he could have been just a random passerby person, because if you're passing by from the I-40, you can't really even see that there's a bunch of kids here. It must have been someone with knowledge of the local surroundings. I mean, wouldn't you agree? Or maybe what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you say is probably correct. I mean, hey, in theory, he could have even grown up playing at that baseball diamond, right? Or have had the opportunity to play there as a visiting team, let's say, from a neighboring community. Um, Also, it is the mid '90s at this point. It's '95, is that correct?
Yes.
So there's not. Let's just be real. Like most, pretty much there was not any real internet at that point, other than just really private services. But there wasn't Yahoo or anything really. Um, but he could have used the Yellow Pages. So I guess if he's some horrible, creepo pervert, I guess he could have ripped out a page from, been carrying around the Yellow Pages or something and had a listing for different baseball diamonds. Because I guess somebody that hunts kids, maybe they're gonna. I mean, yeah, I guess I'm trying to think like how you would think. I guess it would make sense to go buy a baseball diamond and kind of look for somebody that was wandering away from it. I guess real quick, I'm kind of curious then. This is you made a point that kind of escaped me in the whole lead up research for this. So if her mother didn't have a kid in the game, right? So Morgan's mother, it was just her and her mother, right?
Yeah.
So was she was there. I mean, why was she there? She was there to watch kids play games because I guess what her friends maybe had kids in the game. I guess
I
that's the only,
assume that's
you know what I mean.
that's
That's the
what
only
I
reason why it makes sense, right? Because
that's yeah, just to answer the question, yeah, that's sort of what I got from the story. Yeah.
I mean, and by the way, this isn't to criticize the mom, but it doesn't really seem like her daughter was too interested, right? So I guess if that's the case, like she was just socializing, you don't have a lot of friends, you're living well, like this is what your friends do. They go to the little league with their kids. Then maybe she thought, I don't know, it'd be interesting. But yeah, just that kind of it's funny I didn't think of that before. Like why were they at the game if no one from their family was playing in the game? But by the way, it's interesting to think. I mean, for good reasons. Switch the genders. If that had been like a dad going to go watch other people's kids play at a game without his own kid being in the game, people would think that was a little weird, maybe, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even think of this, but I mean,
Yeah.
I could see your
Not,
point. I want to add a little bit information as well to the Morgan, whether she was interested or not. Some sources state that she was actually untying her mother's shoes under like the bleachers a little bit, just as a little funny prank. So that's what she was doing all night. So I mean, she's 6. She's a girl. I think one source stated that she was like she wanted to be a circus artist and a doctor, but she wasn't really into getting sweaty. So she wasn't really into sports. I don't think she was like into a sports type of a kid. Now, I want to quickly, immediately ask you another question. So, one very important detail for me was when I was rationally thinking about this case was the suspect is wearing no shoes, no shirt. Also, I didn't mention this fact, had the hillbilly accent. And the kids, the kids, Arkansas kids said that the guy had a hillbilly accent. So so no, it's I'm not making this out to be like a joke or anything like. But I want to say, so that means that the kids are not used to this accent. And just to finish my question, is that don't you think it's a little bit weird for a suspect with no shoes, no shirt on, some sort of jean shorts, an accent that's not really familiar, at least to the kids, abducting, like preparing an abduction? Like, if you're gonna be abducting children, I would assume you would be at least prepared for the escape, but this guy had no shirt, no nothing, no shoes. I mean, it could happen. I'm not saying that it couldn't happen, but it seems like maybe this guy wasn't. He woke up that day. What all I'm trying to say is he woke up that day. If he did abduct Morgan, we don't know if he's responsible. We just heavily suspect that he's responsible. If he's responsible, I don't think he woke up that day in wanting to abduct a child. I think it was a spur of the moment type of a thing. So I'll let you react to all of this.
Yeah, I'll react to no shirt, no shoes, so other Americans know this saying. This is like an old sign: no shoot, no sorry, no shirt, no shoes, no service. So have you ever heard that expression before?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so that's because like it used to be a problem, probably especially in like the 70s and 80s and beyond, but especially in redneck areas. Yeah, people would show up at McDonald's, no shoes, no shirt. They're like, yeah, no service. Like, we're not going to let you in the store or in the restaurant. So, yeah, it's kind of a marker of hillbilliness, I guess.
Mm,
I was only chuckling because traditionally Arkansas has taken a little bit of a beating as having the reputation, rightly or wrongly, um, of being kind of an extra redneck state, so an extra impoverished and maybe backwater state. Even the famous book Huckleberry Finn, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Um, Arkansas really takes a beating in that book. So even back then, they were really, pretty harsh about it. The one thing I think of it, you make a good point. So it doesn't really sound like someone that's prepared or someone that's living pretty wild. Um, I think he was probably deranged, but then it also brings up um, the same thing that the famous criminologist John Douglas said about our other recent case about the two girls that were killed at the bridge, where he said, "How scary is that?" The Delphi, the Delphi or Delphi, however you say it, murders. He was remarking, "Gosh, think about how scary that was that somebody woke up that day." Or no, it was sorry, it was Dr. Grande. Dr. Grande said, "It's so scary." The guy, I'm mixing up everybody today. This guy woke up and he wasn't even really planning to do this necessarily, though it sounds like there was like a whole spree of these things going on. Do you think? Well, I'll save it for later, but it is interesting to think whether it's the same person or whether it's possible that more than one person could have been
mm,
doing something degenerate like this in an area. It doesn't seem super likely, but I think
right,
it's worth a quick conversation later. But yeah,
for sure.
I mean, it is to me, for somebody to do it like that, either they're really used to like living really rough and they were totally confident in their abilities to, like you said, like run away barefoot and almost naked,
Mm.
or they are just a deranged individual.
Exactly. That's those are very good points. I think we should jump to the suspect sketches. I know we had pre-planned to talk about the sketches later on, but I think it's like part with the course right now of the podcast that we're doing. So we have two sketches released. I have on this particular image the two sketches, I sort of put them together in one JPEG, and I want to ask you a question because you may have some more information. I mean, I just want to quickly state the information regarding the sketches to the audience, and I think then we can maybe delve deeper into the past of these two sketches. The sketch on the right, the one with the lower resolution, and I know this is kind of awkward for everyone who's listening to this on the podcast apps, my apologies, but we're looking at two sketches. One is of a blurry sketch because this is literally back in 95. I guess this is the quality they had. So the one on the right is the sketch of the creepy man, as I've said, the black hair, unkept how should I put it, facial hair. Also, if you could see, there's an outline of a shirt, but then on the other sketch, and let's just quickly take a look. Yep, the other sketch doesn't have an outline of the shirt. Basically, the the one on the right has an outline of the shirt, but we know that the man wasn't wearing a shirt, so that's kind of awkward right there. And then we have a sketch on the left, which is in better resolution. The sketch on the left, if I'm not mistaken, was released in 2001, so 6 years after the case. It was kind of similar to how the Delphi murders were handled, where, we had one sketch initially for a long time. Law enforcement turns around a few years, shows us another one. So this particular selection of two sketches, before we actually analyze what may be different in these sketches, any like backstory on the sketches, or anything you want to add before we move to further on with them?
Yeah, so this was interesting as I was doing some research about, I guess the almost like the historiography of the sketches, like the how they came to be. I found this interesting post from the publications called Today in Fort Smith.com, and it's an editorial from June 4th of 2020. So June 3rd, 2020, last year. And it's called "It's Time, Don't You? It's Time, Don't You Think?" And basically, the gist of the whole thing is that it's frustration with the information that's been released, specifically around both the sketches and the description of the truck. So, what it notes is that, according to this editorial, it's saying that the first sketch wasn't even from anybody at the Little League scene. So, according to this, the first sketch and the description of the truck came from some lady at the laundromat who I guess had witnessed or been one of the witnesses to, one of the other disturbing events that sort of was similar to it. And now, at least according to this editorial, it's saying that now they're saying you need to ignore the first sketch completely. That person's pretty much been cleared as not being involved. So the frustration from them is, well, hey, like you had us for years, chasing after some whole other, clue
Yeah.
that turned out it wasn't even correct. So they were really frustrated. And then they're like, well, what makes you think that the second clue, the second sketch, is it all, once again, is it because at this point they're really decrying what they call incompetence. So this is, once again, law enforcement's quality of an investigation being called into question by outside forces. Yeah, yeah, they're really frustrated, and I think there's some doubts about whether the second sketch and even the red Ford pickup truck on and any other pictures that are being pushed out. This is of course a year ahead of the most recent clue we're going to talk about. But it is interesting to see that some of the publications from the area start to have a very opinionated and frankly harsh on law enforcement opinion about how the investigation was going. And there's like, at what point are we chasing yet another red herring?
Exactly. Okay, so a few things. Now, this is good that gave this information, because I wasn't aware. So, if I'm not mistaken, then I would assume the sketch on the right is potentially connected to one of the incidents that happened, like literally around the same time. Do you know? Like,
So that's
yeah.
a yeah. So it says that it was a description of a description from somebody that saw something that says, oh, here it is, an accurate composite sketch from the unrelated laundromat incident. So they're saying that
Oh,
for whatever
okay.
reason, yeah, they said that according to sources, here's the quote. According to sources, the red truck description in Morgan's case actually came from the laundromat incident. The very incident that was proven. Now that's, I guess, the question is when was it proven? What was the proving mechanism? But for whatever reason, this publication is claiming that it was proven to be unrelated to the Morgan Nick abduction. So I guess that's going to connect to some of our later analysis
Yeah.
where, at what point is it just a coincidence that, some weird creepo someplace else does something that doesn't mean that the same weird creepo is responsible for everything else that happens.
Right, exactly. That's excellent. It is not excellent from the logic standpoint because the red truck was for 100% certainty spotted at the Little League baseball game, and for 100% certainty, it was the only vehicle unaccounted for the night when Morgan disappeared. So I think the coincidences are quite shocking here. Same day, you have no, I mean, yeah, like yeah, exactly the same day, two creepy men, similar descriptions, two red trucks, and they're not the same people, and it's all happening in a very small town. I can't wait to discuss this inconsistency right here, but I want to quickly add to the timeline one more thing. Apparently, there was another witness of this man that we see on the left, and I would assume it was a woman who was watching the Little League baseball game. I think she was probably not related in any way to Colleen or Morgan, because in the attendance there were 300 people. Another interesting fact that, you know, the man who potentially abducted Morgan and Nick was willing to do so in a parking lot of a baseball field that was attended by 300 people. I mean, that's a lot of people, and it makes sense that one of those people actually also saw what was happening, or at least witnessed this man. So yeah, I want to say that another woman witnessed it. And now the other information regarding the sketch on the left is that apparently police had a hard time compiling uh, this suspect's sketch because the boy, the 10-year-old boy, the 8-year-old girl, and this other woman who all witnessed this creepy man had sort of varied descriptions of the suspect. So none of them really matched up perfectly, but I guess we can't really speak on that because we weren't there, we didn't see, but I know what we can discuss still before moving on, and this is very important. So I want to jump back to the timeline. Morgan goes to catch fireflies. Now, I don't know how that works. I've never been catching fireflies. I don't think that we even have fireflies. Don't really know what that thing is. But she went there at 10:30 p.m. to catch fireflies. Now, she was out of sight, so she had to go somewhere a little bit because Morgan's mother, Colleen Nick, at some points did not see her because she was like over the corner or on the hill, something like that. So she's a little bit out of sight. And now she goes at 10:30. The kids come back at 10:45 p.m. So all of this is happening within 15 minutes. Doesn't this sound a little bit to you like this is a really tight space for an abduction, like really, really tight? Because we have to take into account that Morgan had to walk towards the fire fields to catch the fireflies or whatever. She was catching them for some period of time, so I don't know, that's like what, at least 5 minutes. Then she had to go back to the car, her mother's car, and then she had to like go and empty out her, like the sand out of her shoes. So we have to at least get like a good 7 minutes out of the 15 minutes that it happened in. So the abduction is literally like, I don't know, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, like for the actual abduction. So my question to you is, isn't it an oddly short time for an abduction? And if it's not, then how did it happen?
I mean, I don't know. I'm not. I think if it's someone that's just super deranged and just looking for an opportunity to grab a kid, which, going along the argument that this is the same person that was just constantly trying it in the area before, I think it was just wrong time, wrong place for Morgan. So, and then it's because she's so small at like what, 6 years old. Um,
Yeah.
she's just really easy to snatch up. It's amazing when you think how much bigger kids get, even in 2 or 3 years, between 6 and like 8 or 9, they almost double in size,
I
depending on
wanna
the kid.
I wanna
Yeah.
add I wanna add her like physique. I guess so. Morgan was 4 foot tall, and she weighed 55 pounds. So that's I think that's even from what I'm gathering, that's probably small even for a 6-year-old child, if I'm not mistaken. Like 4 feet and 55 pounds. Is that like average? I have no idea.
Um, I'm trying to remember. There's because we actually in my state we have a limit on weight for like how what the limit above which you need to be to let your kid sit in the front seat. And I'm trying to think when my kid hit that limit. I think she's about average. I mean, when I see her in the photos, she looks a little bit skinny. She doesn't look obese,
Hmm.
but she doesn't look like that tall either. But I think like any kind of man in shape, especially the size that they've given. By the way, it's worth mentioning, isn't it interesting how the age range is pretty wide? Once again, this is similar to like Delphi and some of the other cases we covered. I think it's really hard, especially for children, but even other adults. Like I often have a hard time estimating someone's age. Um,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so I think at this particular point, we could definitely move into the questions, because there's actually a lot of questions this week, or maybe not a lot of questions, but questions that I think need a little bit more time for us to answer. So, yeah, well, oh, by the way, before we move to the questions, I see that you also have certain points. I definitely don't want to run past your points. So, do you have like anything else to add for us to discuss before we jump to the question section, where we like try to answer certain key aspects of this case, I believe?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll say is I know one of the I think the criticisms, or not criticisms, people are like, oh, how could those kids let like not do a good job taking care of a younger kid like that? Because I don't know, like, when you were growing up, when you were a kid, did you ever get put in charge of like another kid, like either a sibling or a cousin, or
I think it was
your mom?
the other way
Yeah.
around. I think I was the one who had to be
you were the
taking. Yeah,
you were the you were the job.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, so since I was the oldest, in my kind of immediate family, like I was, definitely in charge of like, my cousins who were like, 7 years or more younger than me, and my siblings and things like that. So it's interesting. I mean, it turns out that she didn't really know those kids that well. It makes sense that at like a little league situation, especially when you have a lot of games coming in and out, because they must have been playing a bunch of games that night, I would guess. Like they probably started around 4 in the afternoon, and we're just plowing ahead and running teams through that thing. It's kind of like a weird flexible situation. I think that it's even kind of weird to have a 10 and a what was it, 10 and an 8-year old ask a 6-year old to come play with them.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like maybe
yeah.
they must have been, yeah, they must have been pretty bored. I mean, there must not have been.
They were
I don't know.
connected. I want to add that they were connected
Okay.
to Colleen, and I believe they were like kids of Colleen's friends.
Huh.
I'm not super confident, because I didn't like focus on the connection of the kids, but I think the premise that I've got is that these kids are somehow connected, and because they were her friends. These kids were not someone who Morgan met for the first time in her life on that
Okay.
day.
But she just wasn't like super good friends with them yet, because just like a casual acquaintance. By the way, I'll just say I'm almost 45 years old, and I've never seen a firefly either. So I would love to see a firefly someday.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're like this insect that, like their ass lights up. Um,
yeah,
it's kind of cool, I guess. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. That's neat. Yeah, yeah. It's like glows. Um, Yeah, I mean, so there's just that was worth mentioning, because that was kind of interesting thing. I think there's a lot of other kids that maybe wouldn't let a 5-year-old out of sight, but you can't expect kids to be looking out for degeneracy all the time. Um, I guess for my thought, one of the things I just thought of is, once again we've run into this show after show is the issue whenever there's disappearances like this, the difference between whether something is helicopter parenting, because that's always been the criticism. Like, all the people, it's like, you should really let your kid, get into more dangerous situations and fail, and it's like, it's true, like, you don't want to overly control the situation, but then it's like, look what the look what the downside is, right? So you can see why people can get paranoid and can probably react too much in the other direction,
Yes.
because yeah, I mean, Morgan's mother, who's still alive now and doing interviews and running a foundation and whatever, she's out a kid, and she's sort of still, she's kind of hoping, her kid will turn up someday. But yeah, it doesn't, it's frustrating. And I also say that I bet you back when, like, I grew up in the 80s, was born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s. I bet you some of the stuff that adults let us do, they would not have had, you know, there been as much news and the internet and ways to find out things that we have now.
Yeah.
So, like, you know what I mean? I think people were just kind of naive about, because this for sure was happening. I mean, case in point, this happened in the 90s. We've covered lots of other cases that have happened in other years. And I think, just think, like back then, you didn't even have the kind of internet coverage you have now when someone goes missing. So, like, I never heard about this when I was, in the mid 90s, because I wasn't in California.
Yeah.
But, it happened, and it happens a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Then my other point is, once again, it is interesting with these disappearances or potential kidnappings, and we've covered some really baffling ones. It's almost like the quote unquote perfect crime for horrible people, right? If they never find the victim, like, we're not talking about criminal geniuses here, but if you never find a body to collect some kind of DNA evidence on, and even in some cases when you do get a body, like some of the other cases we've done this year, I mean, what can you do, right? And then in terms of, footage, I mean, it's amazing, like you said, that there's this photograph of a truck that, they can actually point to and say, well, this vehicle is one that we suspect. I mean, I don't even know how they got that photo. Like, they must have been, what random dummy was taking photographs in a parking lot in 1995, because you didn't have camera phones or anything like that. I mean, this person was using film. Who was wasting film? You get 30 pictures. Who was wasting film in the parking lot? They must have been taking a photo of their kid before the game or something. But I had to laugh, because I remember I was on the way to work on the train some recent years ago, and I saw this one facility had a sign that said, like, all, taping in progress, or all, all activities on premises taped. And I had to laugh, because I was like, well, are you still using VCRs? But that's back then, that's what they had, right? So you didn't even have, like, all the digital ways of storing information and being able to go back a month. Like, you would be lucky if you could look up something from, like, a week ago, and then that thing would get recorded over. It would just get shuffled. So,
Yeah.
for that reason, there's not a lot of evidence. And then, yeah, I guess that was just sort of the initial thoughts I had as I went through this case. I
Yeah.
mean, there are a lot of similarities in some ways. These things are always unique in one way, and then they're very similar in, I guess, some terrible ways. Just
Yeah. Uh, Excellent. Dude, I think at this point we definitely need to jump to the questions. And yeah, we'll ask these questions. I'll try to answer them, and then I will, see if you can answer them as well. So my first question would be, this one is that I initially marked down as, I found it very interesting. I think you actually answered it a little bit, but I still have it, so I just want to quickly read it out. So my first question was, why did the group of friends Morgan went to catch lightning bugs with returned to the game without her? And now we talked a little bit about the closeness of these friends. Were they acquaintances or friends? Not really sure, but they were definitely acquainted at least. But now, what I'm thinking is the strange man spoke to all three of the children. Maybe the strange man was the reason why the two kids went back to the game without Morgan. Maybe they were too creeped out of him and they went to like Colleen and they were like, Morgan is by the car. And they just sort of went to sit in their seats because they were creeped out of what just happened. Perhaps that was the situation, because why else would they leave if they described it quote unquote creepy? The man, why would they leave, a 6-year-old Morgan with a creepy man?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to understand if these kids really understood what was going on. This is for sure the era of stranger danger, by the way. You know what I mean? I mean, me being about 10 years ahead of these kids in age.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I definitely remember in the 80s, there was a lot of like, listen, don't go, don't go into the car, the guy that's trying to give you candy or look for his missing dog or any others of a bunch of like creepy excuses, right?
Mm, exactly.
So it's a little weird.
Exactly. My next question would be, was the suspect a local man? And immediately we have two things to discuss here. So the first thing is that a passerby person who was just passing by, and we could just go to through the Google street view right here. There's no, I don't know how the scenery looked, back in '95, but it couldn't have been too different. Like, there's no way if you're traveling across the main highway, there is no way to see whether or not there's like a place where you could abduct little children. And then another thing is the man was wearing no shirt and no shoes, and like had a hillbilly accent. For some reason, if you're not wearing shoes and you're not wearing a shirt, I think it's not the type of a wardrobe where you're on a mission. Since like you go outside the house, you're on a mission. I don't think it's the type of wardrobe that you would be on a mission with. It's like, I'm just casually hanging out in my local area without shoes or a or a shirt. My beard is unkept. I'm just casually hanging out in the parking lot. Oh, there's a little kid or like a group of little kids. Let's see if I can abduct one. I think it's that type of a situation. And if it is, then I kind of think that this man was definitely a local. I mean, as I've said, like the baseball field is not a place where you could spot from the highway. You have to know that there is a baseball field, and if you know this information, you're probably a local. I mean, that's my rationale. What are your thoughts?
I think I'm gonna differ with you a little bit on this one, but not totally. So I keep on thinking if he's a local, why has nobody ever? Because it's not like we're talking about a huge city or anything, right? We're talking about like a relatively
Yeah.
low population area. Why has nobody ever recognized him or spoke up or I mean that on top of like just the risk of being spotted. Now if he's deranged like his side of it, like, oh, I'm gonna get recognized. The way this person was acting, if he's at all associated with the other events, seems like he doesn't care, right? Like he's not at all thinking about consequences of his actions. He's just looking to fill some kind of immediate need or obsession. Okay, but just the reality of the situation afterwards, that you would think somebody would spot, somebody would, given the amount of attention, someone would say something. So that's what bothers me about the local thing. Now, I would hedge that a little bit by saying I do think it's somebody that could be from maybe, I don't know, a 20 to 40-mile radius where they would have been to that baseball field either, as part of their own involvement with Little League years ago, or, had even had a job, maybe either doing some kind of business associated with the Little League, whether it was even just selling food there, or, helping set up, build the field, or, build a fence, whatever it is. Okay, so that's that. But then I also think, like, well, why couldn't it just be somebody that they have a lot of time? Maybe they're not gainfully employed, and they're spending 100% of their time sometimes looking for little kids to steal, and they're just driving randomly around. And then when they see like a baseball field, they kind of like bookmark that in their mind. Like, I'm going to come back there later when it's time, when a game's going on, and they drive by, and it's like, it's almost like a predator going by water holes, like watering holes in, you
Yeah,
know, and like in the African savannah, where like they know where the other animals are going to be that they're going to prey on.
right. That's a good point. Another question I have is, from all that we know about this suspect, we don't even know if he is responsible for the abduction. As I've said, we only heavily suspect that he is. We don't know for a fact. We don't have that information. Uh, Now, from all we know about the suspect, is it likely that such a man had committed crimes in the past, or after this crime, if he abducted? Like, does this look like someone who could potentially be linked to more crimes? And my answer would be probably yes, because it's not a like, or no as well, because it's, yeah, sure, it's like a crazy event, 300 people at the baseball field, a ton of cars, a ton of potential witnesses. So you're crazy, you have no shirt on, your beard isn't kept, you have no shoes, you have a hillbilly accent. You're not like James Bond over here, like doing like secret missions. You're just like seeing what's gonna happen. And it doesn't look like someone who's actively like super strategic about it to like kidnap kids, but it also to me seems like someone who's crazy enough to keep doing this until he gets caught. So one point we could think about is maybe this guy is already in jail somewhere for like other crimes. That's a good possibility that he's already in jail, like serving a life sentence for something completely different, but under his, bag of tricks he has some more like secrets, some more, skeletons in the closet. Maybe this is the case, or maybe not. Maybe this was a crazy guy, did it once, never did it again. So for me, it's like it's I could see it being either way. Do you have like a strong way you're leaning towards whether he committed more crimes like this, if he was responsible in fact for Morgan Nick's disappearance?
Yeah, no, I agree with you for sure on that point. I feel like he would not stop until he was dead or literally could not do it anymore. When you put that scenario out there, I thought of something. Tell me what you think of this one. This one's a little bit fringy, but it's kind of interesting, and maybe it feeds into how the person could be a local or could be actually known, but why we never heard about it. So what if, let's suppose, this person's in your family, not you, but like the hypothetical you, right?
Yeah.
Somebody, you live in this area, maybe your family's like a little bit trashy, but mostly law abiding, and you've got this relative who's like, unemployable, mentally ill, violent, drunk, drug addicted, just doing, has always been a problem.
Yeah.
And then they go, and then one night, they come back, and they've like done the unspeakable to a child, and there's the child's body, and there's this person, and you're like, oh my gosh, like you is like the relative, you didn't want this to happen, and you know that when it comes out, your already bad family name is going to be, 10 times worse. People are gonna treat you like a pariah in that community, and maybe in your own mind you're like, gosh, well, what could I do, right? Especially with the way the laws are about trying to get help for the mentally ill, and social services, etc., especially in states like Arkansas. So what do you think about the idea that maybe this person's peers or relatives decided to take the law into their own hands and made everything disappear? So like they make this guy disappear, they make her body disappear. Like he's dead, right? He's gone. He's never gonna do anything to anyone else. But then they can't give Morgan's mother closure because obviously they would have to admit to what happened, and of course they're also committing a crime and in multiple ways, right? Because they're
Yeah,
taking,
yeah, yeah.
now the reason why I say this is there's been some amount of, I saw when we did research, there was some amount of like searching of other properties based on tips, and like one of them was like a well
Oh,
on this one
that's we're
property and a house.
coming
Yeah,
up on that for sure. Yeah.
yeah, so that's sort of teasing into that. That's where I'm like, huh, it doesn't seem beyond the realm of possibility, especially because when you think that like a large amount of the gang violence, both organized crime and street gangs and things like that, uh, some amount of that is actually like retaliatory stuff under guise of like almost being like neighborhood law enforcement. I'm not legitimizing those forces, but some amount of that violence is literally like, we did this because you guys did that, and instead of going the legal route, we're gonna find the shortest distance between 2 points because we don't care about the law. We make the law, and now we're gonna punish that person. Does that make sense?
Um, it's like a crazy theory, I would say. Like so, but it's possible. Like if his family members were like, this is gonna be a shameful thing for our family. Let's hide Morgan's body and let's kill this suspect. I mean, it's a yeah, I'm not sure. Like this is a crazy turn of events. I would think. I probably think it's like on the. It's an interesting thing to think about, and of course, it could have happened if that's the question. But now, I want to pose another question. This is very important because police has stalled that we're looking for the suspect, scene with the red truck, all of that stuff. I think at this point, it's really good for us to actually finally talk about this particular picture right here. So this picture has been released recently. It's been released, I think, initially on the documentary called Still Missing Morgan. It has only been aired in Arkansas. I was like really trying to look at it, like watch it, but it's not released anywhere, and I think it's gonna be like multiple episodes. I think I might be mistaken. I think they will release it on Netflix eventually. At least there's like heavy speculation that it's gonna be put out on Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever. And now during that, and they released this picture that we have been teasing for a long time during the show. It's a picture of a red pickup truck with this little, how should I put it, camper thing, a white camper thing on the back end of the pickup truck. It was a little bit smaller, and now I guess I'll return to the truck after I ask you this question, because this is a very important question for us to answer. But then again, I will have some more questions about the truck as well. So first question that I have is, if you're the suspect who talked to the three children and you are the owner of this vehicle, but you had nothing to do with the murders, let's with the disappearance of Morgan Nick, because we don't know if she's dead at this point. She's just missing for a long time. If you're responsible for her disappearance, I mean, if you're not responsible for her disappearance, if you're not connected to it, would you still come out and try to clear your name? Or would you be too scared to come out because you know, just the circumstantial evidence points to you too strongly, and you would be afraid that you will get, you know, a life sentence potentially. So, what is the more likely thing to do? Would the suspect, if he had nothing to do with it, would he more likely like come out clean and try to explain what happened? I had no idea what happened. I saw Morgan venture out into the field somewhere, or like she then was talking to someone else, or would you just hide and protect yourself, destroy the truck or whatever, in fears of being falsely accused? I think it's a good question. What do you think you would do personally in that circumstance?
Part of that answer I think hinges on I'm trying to figure out why the hell are those two trucks on the field? This is a field the kids are going to play on. Why did they drive the trucks out there? You know what I mean? Because they're not like I think originally when I was talking about this picture, and I was thinking about it. I was like, I must have seen it where they were behind the bleachers, but here it looks like they're in front of the bleachers, right? Where
Yeah.
like what are they doing parking in front of where the parking on the where the game's going to be played? So the only reason why I could think why I mean unless for some reason the whole parking lot has to empty through the field, which would just be stupid. I don't even know why they would build it like that. I figured like they must have been dropping off equipment. So the kind of a person that's dropping off equipment or maybe even like setting up the field from, you know what I mean, they're offloading stuff off the trucks or equipment or whatever it is, you know, bats and everything else that they brought. I figured that person's going to be a responsible person that has a reputation and is going to say, "Hey, no, this is like, you know, we were dropping off the bases and all the other stuff for the day for the game." And that's called a camper shell, by the way, the white thing.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
so I guess the other thing I gotta wonder is, and everyone keeps talking about these trucks. Dude, this is like a truck that already doesn't look very new. Like these look like, you know, 1980s trucks in 1995. What are the odds that thing is even still around? And if it is, I feel like it probably at some point was sold off to another country. So like a lot of
Yeah.
the reason why I say that is a lot of the cars in this country, once they've been in accidents or just hit a certain age where it has almost no value and can't meet air emission standards, they get sold off to Latin America. So if
Right.
that truck is still alive and someone isn't just like a big, it happens, but you know, like a big collector of vintage 80s pickup trucks. I mean, that thing's in like Guatemala or, you know,
But like,
El Salvador.
I want to add some more information
Yeah.
because I think this is gonna play a part. 8,000 similar red pickup trucks had been checked out by police in the following month. So 8,000 from the area. There's a good chance, maybe, that they have seen it, don't you think? Or like were in contact with it? Because 8,000, dude, that's a lot of red pickup
Yeah.
trucks, don't you think?
Yeah, no, that's a lot. I mean, yeah, I guess the question is what kind of records did they keep? Can they retrieve that data now? So did they stick it on like a a 5 1/4 floppy
Oh,
disk?
the in terms of data, they actually rented out like a shed. They had to rent out a shed. There were so many tips, insane amount of tips. There was a shed up to the ceiling filled with files, man. It's a
Yeah. So what
lot of
happened to that
tips.
stuff, right? I mean, that's I mean, paper files. So what happened to that? You know, like did
Exactly.
anybody ever? Could they? Yeah, I would. Could you even other than like microfiche? How would you even digitize? Because you know, like by the way, this is remember 1995. There's essentially no digital cameras other than the military.
Yes.
So there's no like you know there's it's very hard to store that. So I guess that's once again that's always the struggle is law enforcement will have a case like this that's very important to a group of people and then they're like, well, they can't rent a shed for every single person that goes missing or dies.
Exactly.
So at some point those files they get shredded, they get thrown away if they're not turned into digital data and even if they are a shed full of stuff is like I mean I don't know how many you know what I mean if you can't the, if you don't have the software to turn a picture of a document into like you know a text file then you have to save a picture. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, another question that I had about this particular truck is that there's a lot of detail, like the camper shell, the white camper shell that we see in this picture. It apparently was a few inches too small. Okay, a few inches too small for the pickup truck. There's a detail that the pickup truck had potentially some damage on the front or on the back. I can't really tell, but it doesn't really matter because we can't see anything here particular. I mean, it matters for sure. It matters in order of like trying to locate this truck. But like the point I'm trying to make here is there's we have a super blurry picture of we don't even know if the truck is in front of the bleachers or behind the bleachers. It's like hard to say. We don't know who took it. We kind of know how it came to law enforcement's possession. I think one of the law enforcement person was like really going through like the camera or everyone who was like taking pictures, and that's how they connected this picture. So I would assume they had this picture since like day one almost. Definitely not like a recent unearthing of this thing per se. But the question is, there's so much detail about this pickup truck. So who came up with this? Who came up with these details? Did the 10-year-old boy and the 8-year-old girl noticed? By the way, we also have that this truck had Arkansas license plates. So did the kids, the little children, notice the plates? Noticed that the camper shell was by a few inches too small for the pickup truck? Did they notice the damage of the pickup truck? Did they notice that it's like a Ford pickup truck? Would the little children notice these details, especially the camper shell being too small? Now, the other witness, the third witness, the woman, I think she was watching from way back in the distance, and obviously she only probably had a few glimpses as well because she didn't see Morgan getting inside of this pickup truck. Let's remember, no one has seen Morgan get inside of a pickup truck. No one seen Morgan leave the baseball field. No one heard Morgan's screams. No one heard any screams other than, little league baseball screams where kids like scream when they play. But no one really heard or seen or had any recollection of seeing a little girl getting abducted. But we have a super detailed, nicely laid out information. Arkansas license plate, the camper shell is too small, damage on the front or on the back. It's a red Ford. So all of these details about the truck, super in-depth details about the truck, but no one really saw anything. So how, in your opinion, dude, how are all of these details coming up? Would like the little children report such like accurate small things?
No, and I think you make a good point. This ties exactly into those criticisms that it feels like they're reaching. Like they're yeah. How do I've never heard a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old criticize someone's camper shell fit on their truck. I don't feel like that's details.
Yeah.
Those are details that the kids would notice. I don't get. I still understand what that truck's doing in front of the bleachers. So that
Right.
doesn't, you know what I mean? It doesn't seem like, I think what you said. Okay, we could say it's because the person's deranged and they don't know how to even do a crime properly, though apparently they do since they haven't been caught. But yeah, I don't understand why that truck is in front of a whole, you know,
Mm.
set of bleachers full of spectators. And I mean, so I feel like they're compiling these little pieces of data from somebody that might have seen something, that might have remembered something. And meanwhile, every day that goes by, those memories,
Yeah.
which were already not that reliable, get less and less reliable.
Okay. Okay, so a really quick question because the really hard and interesting questions is gonna come really shortly. The last question I have, well, it's super important as well, but like I don't want to stop here for too long. So, how did it happen? Let's say we're gonna go by the official theory that she was kidnapped. How do we think it happened? How was she kidnapped? Like, any ideas? Because I will say I have no idea. Like, I have no idea how it went down. Like, it was a situation where the guy lured her in. Did Morgan seem like she was the type of a kid who get lured in? How did it happen? Like, if he did kidnap her, like how? You know what I mean?
I I mean, I'm gonna just guess. I'm gonna bet it was just pure brute force. So he's got a camper shell. I'm assuming that thing locks from the outside, and maybe it's hard to tell what's going on the inside. I feel like the dude just literally waits till no one's looking. She's over by her mom's car supposedly emptying out her shoes, so she's already like not really visible to
Yeah.
other people. I think he ducks down. He like, I mean, I suppose you could strike her and just knock her out, but you could also kill somebody pretty easily that way. But who knows? Um, and either that or he slaps his hand over her mouth and just guns it to the trunk. Like he's got the truck parked like maybe right by that parking space,
Yeah.
chucks her in the back, locks it, and just gets out of there, and then maybe drives someplace where even if she were pounding on the windows, which who knows if she would do that? She might just be totally afraid and not know what's going on. He just goes someplace where he can kind of better control the
Mm.
situation and like tie her up and just otherwise immobilize her. But yeah, I don't think he does like a really involved thing. Like I think someone like that just smashes and grabs.
Yeah, I mean, fits his description. No shirts, no shoes. Like, I don't think he's gonna be trying to like, seduce a little girl with like candies or whatever. Now let's move to the I think very important question. So the first question is obviously it's a big elephant in the room for some people. I think was this disappearance connected to the other two disappearances that happened like literally within a day or on the same day. So I'm talking about firstly, and I want to jump to the Google Earth map as well. It's going to be easier for me to illustrate these other potentially connected, events. So earlier that evening on the same day in the same town of Alma, Arkansas, uh, an unknown male driving a red truck attempted to lure a 4-year-old girl to his vehicle. The abduction was halted when the child's mother intervened and alerted those around her. So a 4-year-old is apparently being potentially it was a potential abduction of a 4-year-old, which definitely if that did happen, because let's remember Colleen Nick said that this did not happen, but I only saw one source stating that Colleen Nick said it did not happen. I didn't hear Colleen Nick actually saying that, so who knows? But like Charlie Project says that it happened, so I mean it's up to the audience members to decide who to believe here. But if it did happen, I would say things like this definitely doesn't happen every day in Alma. That's like a yearly occasion. So I don't know, like two of these things happening on the same day kind of sounds connected to me. Also the red truck, and then also the next day after Morgan vanished, another report came through to the police when an unnamed man matching Morgan's alleged abductor description unsuccessfully tried enticing a 9-year-old girl into a men's restroom inside of a convenience store 15 miles away from Alma in Fort Smith. The Fort Smith is this town, it's 15 miles away. Also, I would it's a bigger town. I would also say abductions like this probably not a daily occurrence. enforcement as well, and also to add to the okay, so my thoughts, because we have two more cases after this that could potentially connect, so two more cases, but these are the most obvious ones that we should try to connect. So for the first one, if it did happen in Alma, I would bet, if I had to bet, I would bet it's connected, if I had to bet, because how many little children are getting abducted in Alma? That's like, that probably never happens ever. So it had to be the same guy, especially on the same day. What's the coincidence that two different creepy men with red trucks are trying to abduct children, young children, around the ages of 4 or 6 in Alma, on the same day? Really suspicious. But for the second one in Fourth Myth, I'm not so sure. Because you know why? Let's think of it of this way. Let's say the man tries to abduct that girl in a laundromat, is unsuccessful, then goes to the baseball field, is successful when abducting Morgan. Would he really go the next day to Fourth Myth to try to entice someone into a men's restroom in a convenience store after, like, literally like being super successful the previous day? Wouldn't the suspect want to take a little bit of a break? And where's Morgan at that point, if that's the case? So I'm not really sure about the second one, but if the first one really happened, then I would say the first one, I would bet it's connected. So your thoughts?
I wonder, just for the to answer the last part of your question first. I always think of the Lindbergh baby case. So if we maybe we'll cover that someday. But look, the guy that kidnapped the baby, he didn't even make it to the ground before he had accidentally killed the baby. You know what I mean? So in his efforts to kind of like get the baby out of the house and down a ladder with himself. So like, per my point, what if he goes and tries to kidnap Morgan and he does it? He's too forceful, and when he finally gets to some other location, it's like, oh, she's dead, and he doesn't want to leave any evidence, so he disposes of the body in a way that the body's never found, and then he's still got this, horrible degenerate itch to scratch. And maybe that's why that other thing happens. I think, to your point, though, I agree with you. It doesn't seem likely. It doesn't seem likely that it could be anyone else than the same person, and that's probably why the police used those other cases as a proxy to be the same thing that happened to Morgan, in absence of like actual eyewitness, um, you know,
Yeah.
someone actually seeing it happen. So then this begs the question, and maybe this is the next thing you're going to talk about. Why did it stop? Why didn't it keep happening?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it didn't, right? Because it just stopped. Like, if we're talking about close proximity, apparently it stopped. So maybe it was someone super deranged who just had to do it, like on like those few days. Maybe something got into their head or anything like that. Now I want to quickly talk a little bit about another case that we could potentially link, and it's there are a few cases that are linked to that people are trying to find out whether it's connected. But I know for a fact, because I've watched a news report of like police officers in the area who said that they, for a very long time, they were trying to connect these two cases together and contemplating whether the Melissa Witt's murder case is connected to the disappearance of Morgan Nick. A little background on Melissa Witt's case: it happened a little over a year before Morgan Nick's case. It happened in a Fourth Myth. So as I've said, the same town where, the next day, apparently after Morgan Nick's disappearance, someone was already enticing little children into the men's restroom. So we know for a fact that in Fourth Myth, creepy things happened, at least a year before, with the Melissa Witt's case, because on December 1st, 1994, in Fourth Myth, Melissa Witt parked her car. Melissa Witt was, by the way, a 19-year-old student. She, age-wise, she didn't match Morgan Nick's description. She was 19. She was a Caucasian and she was blonde, kind of in the same way that Morgan's Nick, but Melissa was a lot older. She was already a college student, as I've said. So on December 1st, 1994, she parked her car in the Bowling World parking lot of Fourth Smith. So the Bowling World parking lot is this particular parking lot right here. Her mother, Mary Ann Witt, was a member of the Bowling Alley's Bowling League. Melissa frequently met her mother at the bowling alley so they could get dinner together. According to J.C. Ryder, an investigator and former Fort Smith police chief who was assigned to her case for 8 years, he stated that, quote, Melissa was abducted from the Bowling World parking lot. She was struck in the head. Evidence found at the scene show signs of a struggle. There was blood, and there was also uh, keys and an earring. So her keys, her earring, and blood. I don't know if they did DNA on the blood, but I would assume it's probably her blood. So her blood, her keys, and her one earring is found on December 1st in this parking lot. Now, on January 13th, 1995, so, a good, like, almost a month later, almost a month after this, on the same year when Morgan Nick disappeared, but just way back in January, not in the summer, only 6 weeks after Melissa's abduction. Oh, okay, so it was 6 weeks. Two hunters were making their way through the Ozark National Forest. So let's zoom out a little bit. The Ozark National Forest is pretty much this location right here, around the Turner Bend area. This is the Turner Bend area. So I'll just zoom out a little bit for a better illustration of what's happening for the audience members. The men, the hunters, discovered the naked body of a young woman who would later be identified through dental records as the 19-year-old Melissa Witt, who disappeared from the parking lot earlier, 6 weeks earlier. Her body was placed near a headstone-like rock. Her clothing was missing from the crime scene, including her jeans, her undergarments, her purse, her earrings, and her Mickey Mouse watch. She had been strangled to death and sexually assaulted. According to the same J.C. Ryder, quote, her body seemed to have been moved from its intended resting place. So the question is here is, did Melissa's murderer come back to the location and move her body after he killed her? And was she killed in another part of the forest and then moved to the Turner Bend area, which is kind of an area that you have to drive past? There's like a convenience store or something like that here as well. It's like a super, like, there's not a lot of people here, obviously, but people definitely go through here on a regular basis. So was she moved there to be later found? I don't know. So that's the story of Melissa Witt. First of all, do you think it's connected? To answer that question, I will say, I've probably, because there's not a lot of crimes going on in this area of Arkansas. I would say it's not heavily populated. It's literally happening in close proximity, time wise, and physically. Like, it's happening literally in the nearby town. But the counter for that would be that Melissa was a lot older, and from what we know of the Morgan and Nick's disappearance, the suspect who potentially kidnapped Morgan Nick, he was probably a creepy guy looking to kidnap kids. That's what I've gotten. He's like an unprepared, crazy guy. I'm just gonna snatch up a kid. Now, Morgan Nick's disappearance kind of doesn't indicate to me that Melissa Witt's disappearance doesn't really indicate that to me. That disappearance to me almost indicates like someone who's like out to kill women, you know what I mean? Like in the parking lot, here, like I'll snatch you up and then I'll kill you in the, Ozark National Forest type of a situation. So do you think it's connected?
No, I don't. I think it doesn't fit what this person is interested in, and I would even bet that this person is afraid of women. You know, the Morgan's killer, and if he's the same person that tried the other two things, I think he would be. And I don't mean this in any kind of like big conspiracy sense. I literally mean like he may not be able to even relate, and he may to an adult woman or someone close to being an adult woman, and he may be actually like intimidated. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
he may like actually feel like shyness or just paralysis
Mm.
in the face of having to deal with like another adult that way.
Okay, okay. The last case that could be potentially connected, and I didn't find a strong connection here, but the person who wrote the blog that I was writing made a good case that it's an unknown case. For some reason, no one's talking about it. So on September 12th, 1981, so 14 years ago, so it's already hard to connect that, but like, let's listen in. 5-year-old Jackie Dean Hay, so a female 5-year-old, was last seen with her family and on an outing in a park in Topeka. So Topeka is already in Oklahoma. So once again, the distance is a little bit harder. I'm zooming out for a better illustration here. So Jackie was last seen walking away from the park at 4 p.m. And then as she was walking around, it was noticed by a witness that a man was following her. She has never been seen since. Police did not search for Jackie for hours after she went missing. They picked up a local man for questioning, but they released him with no charges. Police believe her family is not responsible for her disappearance, and that she was most likely abducted. So I guess the person who wrote this blog, the blog is called Deanie Peters. Deanie Peters, missingangels.blogspot.com. It's like this person writes really good articles, I would say, on these disappearances, and they kind of found this particular case kind of interesting, or at least they stated that it's potentially hard to connect it, but I will say it's good for us to discuss about these other cases. Do you think it's connected? I personally think the fact that it happened 14 years ago, as well as the distance, is kind of like this is a lot longer. This is like hundreds of miles away, or like 100 of miles away. And 14 years ago, I think it's probably not connected, because the guy who did the abduction in Morgan and Nick's case does not look to me like someone who would be successful in abducting children for multiple decades. I think it's the type of guy who get caught really quickly. He had no shoes, no shirt, that didn't seem prepared. So your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't. I feel like that guy's game is almost over. The one in Morgan's situation, it's just like I can't. It almost feels like they want to get caught, or they're just so out of control that yeah. I keep on wondering, like, have they not already looked at jails, people that were in accidents? You know what I mean? People that literally died or were institutionalized or incapacitated in
Hmm.
that immediate period. Yeah, because what would make them stop?
Exactly. And then lastly, in terms of the question section, I think we need to really go through the events that happened, after her disappearance. So as you entailed a little bit earlier, the searched properties of other people. So we have a few points here, and then I guess I want to read them out, and then I will want your opinion whether you think it could be potentially connected. Because for everyone who's on the Google Google Earth, with us right now, looking at the visual assets, I guess one particular tip suggested that Morgan's body could be located on a private property in Boonville, Arkansas, the information was deemed so specific and credible that the police initiated an immediate examination on January 15th, 2002. So this is happening 7 years after the disappearance. After a full day of digging with a backhoe, nothing was unearthed, and the investigation was concluded at 10:30 p.m. I guess on the same day. So this is Boonville. Okay, so this is happening in Boonville. I'm gonna quickly read out the other ones, and then let's see if any of them sound suspicious to us. Now, on November 16th, 2010, so this is 15 years ago, so this is way down in the timeline, a narcotics officer 35 miles away in Spyro, so this is Spyro right here. It's already in Oklahoma, it's not in Arkansas. uh, Alerted investigators in Crawford County to an abandoned trailer home belonging to a convicted child molester who was serving time in prison. The information supplied was directly focused on Morgan's case specifically, but the individual had been considered a viable person of interest since the very beginning of Morgan's case, and he hadn't been ruled out. So this information in Spyro, I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, it wasn't specifically connected to Morgan's case, but the owner of the trailer in question was specifically connected. So it's like that. Like, yo, we have a creepy trailer in Spyro, and the guy who owns the creepy trailer, he was never cleared in the Morgan Nick's case. He's a child molester. Detectives in Crawford County assisted with the investigation at the property, hoping to locate any DNA evidence. So they were trying to find the DNA evidence to see if Morgan and Nick was ever at this particular trailer. So they actively were trying to locate the Morgan's DNA, and they were not successful. They did not locate any of the DNA. Maybe there was some DNA. We don't know. Maybe they just didn't find it, but they were not successful. Then another thing, on June 23rd, 2012. So this is 2 years after that. So this is 17 years later after the disappearance. A little more than 17 years after Morgan disappeared, Tonya Renee Smith, a 24-year-old Hollister, Missouri native who had served time in Louisiana State Prison, tried assuming Morgan Nick's identity by purchasing vital documents and a birth certificate via the website Vital Check. Due to the extreme nature of Morgan Nick's case, the police were alerted on August 2nd, 2012. Tonya was apprehended in Missouri. She was soon extradited to Arkansas and spent 120 days in Pulaski County Jail. On February 28, 2013, she was charged with computer fraud and sentenced to 6 years of probation and ordered to pay a fine of $2,500. So I don't think this is connected, but I will let you chime in really soon, man. I don't think it's probably connected because this was a 24-year-old woman who would have been Morgan's age at the time of Morgan's disappearance. So how could she be potentially connected? What, she killed Morgan and then as she grew up, oh, I'll take her identity. I don't think that was the case, but let's move on. And then on December 18th, this is the last point. This is the last point, and it's very important. Let's listen in. On December 18th, 2017, another seemingly crucial tip regarding a water well led investigators back to the abandoned trailer home in Spyro. So back to the same trailer in Spyro that was searched for DNA in 2010. In 2017, they go back there into a water well to check the well. Now, how it went down is they actually went back there not to check the well. They went back there just again to do another check because of more information to see maybe they can find DNA again in this trailer. and they had cadaver dogs this time, and the cadaver dogs indicated towards the water well in this trailer. Now, a lot of people say that maybe this was unrelated to Morgan Nick, because cadaver dogs could probably indicate to any dead things, like dead birds or dead skunks or whoever could be dead inside of the water well. So basically, the investigation spent the entire afternoon combing for new evidence, but regrettably, their efforts proved fruitless. Okay, so I've been talking for a lot. So out of all of these things, I think the most interesting would be I guess obviously the house in the trailer in Spyro that was checked twice, and then obviously a private property in Boonville, Arkansas in 2002 that was checked with a backhoe, but nothing was found. So your thoughts on all of this, man?
Yeah, I mean, so that to me fills in the blank about whether it was a local or, and or somebody that was recognized by that description, and that just for legal reasons everybody's sort of sitting on what they know, if that makes sense. So
Hmm.
like they don't want to get sued and say, well, and they don't want to prejudice juries either, because
Yeah,
ultimately a jury is going to have to be taken from one of these areas,
yeah,
and they don't want, once it goes to jury, it is a whole other thing, set of concerns we talked about. So yeah, from that perspective, I mean, to me that seems like a strong, I mean, it kind of fits my wacky theory about
mm,
it being covered up by a bigger group of people. I can tell you in the interviews I've seen with people that either follow the case or associated with the case, or especially including her mother, and some of the literature and kind of things that have come out of like law enforcement when they've talked about the case, they keep on thinking and saying that somebody knows something, and that to get revenge or to maybe right or wrong, wherever the reason is, that someone is going to say something at some point. And it sounds like, I mean, a couple times someone has tried to say something.
yeah,
Whether that was whether it was in good faith, that's the question. Because look, that's just like the other side of the coin. That would be a good way to mess somebody up pretty good, right?
yeah,
You wanna make someone's life hell, who lives in Oklahoma, who's like, in their, I don't know, 50s, 60s now. Well, tell the cops that they kidnapped and killed Morgan Nick, right?
right,
That's going to make a whole bunch of problems for them, that maybe, just out of like some kind of dispute, or marriage gone wrong, etc.
yeah,
So it isn't always necessarily in good faith, but this is interesting to me, that I feel like there's maybe that's like the other source of frustration from the local press there, is like, hey, like give us some transparency into what's really going on here. And is there like some awful creepo living in the neighborhood? I mean, one of those houses was already connected to like a convicted person, right? And I'm just
yep,
looking back through the notes.
yep,
So yeah, it's pretty interesting. Once again, by the way, just to tack on, in terms of them not finding anything, well, look at the Kristen Smart case, which we've covered twice now, and it's becoming increasingly clear. I mean, I'll just say it. I think her body probably was buried on one of the places they looked, and they still couldn't find it,
yeah,
right? They could
right,
not in time, is what's being alleged, not in time for it to somehow be disposed of right under their noses.
yeah.
So, from that perspective, I'm not at all in doubt that there could have been something on the property, either at the time or in the past, and they just
Yeah.
couldn't find it because it's hard.
Right. Okay. So, throw another little question to throw it back. I think it's very important to mention this fact that Colleen Nick said that she thinks the case is closer to getting solved now than ever before. We have this new picture released of a truck, red truck from back in '95. We have this new documentary released. There's a lot of people who are thinking that this is about to get solved, dude, in your opinion, why do you think this is like this picture released like another I think multiple hundreds of tips in Arkansas had been released right after the new documentary aired. There's a lot of people putting in their own input. Now I guess we could just speculate and not really get anywhere, but there's one question that if we answer this, I think it's a question that we could think about, and maybe it's a smart question. I think the question is, do you think that because Colleen Nick is stating that she believes it's closer than ever to be solved, and she said she keeps constant communication with law enforcement, then does that mean that law enforcement potentially told her something, maybe about the trailer in Spyro, maybe about one of these other potential connected criminals who did another crime, then they're about to pin Morgan Nick on them as well? Like, do you think that all of this commotion about this case recently, do you think that the police has something concrete, or is this just an attempt to get more tips, and in factuality they don't really have anything because they're asking for tips, they're asking for information? So would you say that they do have something concrete and it's about to break, or they got nothing and they just want to spark the interest once again? Which of these things do you think is happening right now?
I think it's the second. The sense I get from Morgan's mother, from Colleen, when she talks in the press, and she's admitted it, is that she's essentially gambling on the 2% chance, so the 2% of missing people that are found in some way, um, that Morgan's going to be that 2%. And she admits it's not realistic. So from that sense and those admissions that she's made,
Yeah.
I don't think. Yeah.
Right. That's a really logical answer, and it's unfortunate as well. And I guess we have the theories, but for the theories, I guess I'll just wanna quickly read them out, and then we'll think what's the most likely thing here. So the theories would be that Morgan Nick was abducted by the suspect that we've talked about, that Morgan Nick was potentially abducted by someone else. That would probably entail that the suspect saw Morgan Nick walk away somewhere. He was not involved in the disappearance, but is now actively, or if he's still alive, then he's actively hiding because he's afraid that they're gonna connect him to the case and he doesn't want to go out. Is there another theory is whether or not Morgan Nick just wandered off, almost like the Andrew Gosden case, just wandered off somewhere. I mean, she was 6. She seemed really connected to her mother. It doesn't seem like she would do that, but it's worth discussing. Another one would be, is Morgan Nick still alive? And maybe she doesn't remember her past, and maybe she will come back to life. I mean, maybe she will reconnect with her mother. And then, oh yeah, that's literally the last one. So out of these 4 theories, I guess for me the most likely one would be that Morgan Nick was abducted by the suspect. I would be leaning that way. What are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even though no one saw it, so it's such a weird disappearance because unlike the other ones, we really don't have any other clues other than the words of a couple of very young children and then some other weird things that happened in the area. Yeah, I think she was abducted by that specific suspect.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we've, at least on my end, I think we've covered everything we wanted to cover. It was a really fun show. Anything you wanna add before I guess we sign out, man?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I'll just for a little bit of housekeeping. We have our big magic 100th episode coming up. You know, the next one after this, and there seems to be some excitement about what we're going to cover. Um, it's worth saying that, I think listeners might be surprised. And of course, we always appreciate the comments. We always appreciate when you like the episodes, if you like them, because then it gives us feedback about, what kind of content you like. And we hope that we're also doing a good job of bringing things that you might not always know about or think about, um, to your attention. So yeah, that's it for me.
For sure. But the next week, we'll have a really cool discussion, I guess, once more about that case. It's a really fascinating case. For me personally, it has been on my mind like many years, even before I started, this podcast with Glenn. So it's gonna be really interesting to go back there next week. Okay, guys, have fun with the rest of your weekend. We really enjoyed discussing this case, and as always, leave a subscribe, leave a like if you enjoyed, and we'll see you next week. Peace out.